All right. Mel and Chris, do you both want to join me on camera?
I'd love to.
Great, thank you. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to Building a System-Wide Brand for Online Education with Missouri Online. Thanks for joining us for this webinar today. We will be talking about brand strategy, specifically for online brands. I do want to take a moment and thank our industry partner, APSIA, and the APSIA membership for being a part of this webinar today. We are thrilled that you are all here to have this conversation and to sharing this story with us today. Just setting the stage for you and how this webinar will proceed. I will give you a little introduction of myself, mostly for an audio check. I will then introduce our speakers and hit some housekeeping items, and then we'll jump into the content that you came for today. So I am Christine Kramer. I'm the VP of Marketing at Carnegie, the leader and innovator in higher education marketing and enrollment strategy. If you're not familiar with Carnegie, we offer groundbreaking services in the areas of research, digital marketing, lead generation, student search, slate optimization, website development, creative, financial aid optimization, and strategy, which we are here to talk about today. And as I have said before, specifically brand strategy. In my role, I work collaboratively with my colleagues here at Carnegie to ensure that we are a relied upon partner and brand in the higher education market. I personally have spent 15 years in higher education marketing in the communication space, running strategy and operations for enrollment communications, and advising on those services as a consultant in more recent years. So this is where I want to pause and do a quick audio check. If you were able to hear the introduction I did of myself, if a few of you could just drop any kind of note into chat, that would be greatly appreciated, and then we can proceed. All right, we have a thumbs up. All right, moving on. Thank you for confirming our audio is working. That's at least a good first step here. So I do have a couple of housekeeping items that I'll cover quickly. Today's webinar will last about 45 minutes with an additional 15 minutes reserved for Q&A. We are recording this webinar and it will be available for download along with today's slide deck next week. You will be given early access to the recording. I will send you an email to let you know when the content is available. During the webinar, you can ask questions using the Zoom control panel's question feature, and we'll be sure to get to those questions at the end of our content. We've also opened up the Zoom chat room, so feel free to share ideas, ask questions, and interact with the other attendees during the presentation. Just make sure that if you'd like everyone to see your comment, question, or great idea, ensure that your share settings are marked to all attendees and presenters. Finally, please help us help you by filling out a quick post-webinar survey. Your comments and ratings are greatly appreciated and will influence our future content. So without further delay, I would like to introduce you to our speakers for today's webinar. They were both part of the Missouri Online project, brand project team, and are here to share that story with you today. So Chris Tipton. Hi, Chris. Chris has devoted nearly 2 decades to promoting online higher education, first as a lead strategist for the University of Missouri-Columbia, or Mizzou, and now as the marketing director for Missouri Online. Her work focuses on advertising, branding, and strategic solutions for 4 universities with more than 350 programs. As an organizational leader, she is on the forefront, fostering collaboration among the 4 institutions to deploy the Missouri Online brand, further national recognition, and help each campus reach its online enrollment goals. Our next speaker is Mel. Hi, Mel.
Hey there.
Melissa Vagnis has spent 15 years in higher education, in the higher education sector, and has a passion for elevating brands and moving brand or organizations forward. She is known for her relentless work ethic and is a fearless champion for everything that she does. Prior to joining Carnegie 4.5 years ago, Melissa held the position of Director of Communications and Marketing at the University of Minnesota Morris. She now uses her expertise at Carnegie to guide clients through research, strategy, creative, and strategic marketing. So our goal today will be to share a real-world success story with you and add tactics to your strategy toolkit. We'll do that by walking through this agenda. So we will tell you or introduce the story of Missouri Online. We'll talk a little bit about the work that was done. We'll talk about the results that we saw, and then we'll get to your questions at the end. So with that, if that sounds good to everyone, I will hand the mic over to Mel to let us know what we'll learn today.
Awesome. Thanks, Christine. Yeah, I am very excited to be here with you. I have had the pleasure of, as Christine said, working on this Missouri Online project since the very beginning on the Carnegie side, and have had the pleasure of working with Chris that entire time as well. And so the fact that she and I are both here and have been personally involved with this from the very beginning, we're really hoping that we're going to be able to help you all think about whatever institution you're at or situation you find yourself in, that there are tools or lessons learned as we walk through this with you at a high level that you can take away and use that moving forward. So one of the greatest joys of working on this project is that there was a very clear goal in mind. There was, a goal to understand consensus around brand strategy. So our very clear stance on reaching consensus and reaching and helping that inform brand strategy is that the few focus groups in a small conference room, maybe a quick audience survey, just really doesn't cut it. What has to happen is that because we are almost all in this higher education sector, all of our stakeholders, especially our internal stakeholders, are all very, very, very invested in our brands, in our stories, and those stakeholders have a passion for our institutions and just higher education in general, that if we can help steward that excitement and that vision that our stakeholders have, that is something that if we keep folks involved early and help them be constructive along the way without really causing any roadblocks, that's the key to success. And so I can imagine everyone on this webinar or has that are listening in the future has been a part of some kind of committee work where it just feels like this endless stakeholder feedback loop, and that it's endless and there's never really a productive result, and that everyone just feels like you're being pulled in too many directions. And so that's something that we took part of in this project, and I hope that you're going to walk away with some really interesting facts or ways to think about using that work in your everyday life in the future. So we're always going to be thinking about how to create buy-in and how to create that consensus. We're also going to cover how we used really a data-driven approach, but that we also had our brand strategy deeply rooted in a strategic vision, so that we knew our whole goal was to increase awareness and enrollment. And the key here was really knowing your institution, knowing your audience, and really being that dot connector for both. And so we can't just rely on a strong brand strategy. We really need to think about how do we foster it? How do we then pair that with an equally strong marketing strategy? And that's a lot of diligent collaboration, a lot of coordination and consistency. So we're going to talk more about that as well. So I think let's dig into the actual case study type story that we're going to walk you through today about this project a little bit more in depth. So in 2019, across our desks came a RFP from the University of Missouri system that we're really looking for a very strong and strategic partner that would help provide services in partnership with the University of Missouri system team to determine really how to brand and how to name this new entity. This entity was going to be an e-learning effort across the University of Missouri system. So the project was to create a brand strategy that goes alongside a very, very robust and equally almost complicated operational effort that was underway of bringing all those online learning offerings. So there were 4 institutions that all have varying levels of e-learning that were coming together. As you can imagine, that was no small task, but it was something that both Carnegie was up for the challenge as well as the Missouri team. So we came together in this great partnership to achieve what we'll walk you through some great success throughout this. So I hope that this part is a little fun for you. What we wanted to make sure that this was engaging. So what I have done is prepared some questions for Chris, and she's going to give the Missouri Online point of view. And then I'm going to toss it to her, and she's going to ask me some questions about how this project all came together. So Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I want you to dig into a little bit more that opportunity that you all had in front of you in 2019, and really why was this endeavor so important?
So you touched on this a little bit, Mel. In 2019, our system president put in motion steps towards creating a framework of an entity that would support all 4 institutions in meeting the goal of strategically growing online program enrollment and becoming a premier e-learning provider. No small task. Bringing all 4 institutions together under one umbrella provided us the opportunity to leverage the full portfolio in a cohesive way. We could strategically raise awareness for all and give a single destination and messaging to the public and our prospective students.
Again, I don't think we could underpin that with no small task. And you know, also just, I know no one probably has this far from their mind, but 2019 was pre-global pandemic, and e-learning was, of course, very strong, but it was just about to become a lot stronger and a lot more needed. And it was fun to be working with with institutions coming together that have all had very strong experience in e-learning, and then packaging that together again in that umbrella as a global pandemic was upon us. So I want to dig into that just a little bit more, Chris. Obviously, with any project, of course, of this magnitude, there's going to be hurdles. So I want you to talk about maybe some of your biggest hurdles, and tell me a little bit about which ones were, or both hurdles that were expected and unexpected.
Sure. So it's no surprise to anybody viewing this webinar that each institution had its own brand identity and varying levels of brand equity in the marketplace. They also had differing ways of talking about their online offerings and navigating their websites. The combined portfolio was extensive. At the time, I think roughly 300 offerings, and included like or competing online programs. What was surprising, though maybe it shouldn't have been, was that each institution didn't define online programs with the same parameters. So for example, one institution defined an online program if 50% of the curriculum had the online modality, whereas another institution required that 100% of the curriculum be online for that designation. And utilizing coding in their CRM to differentiate between students in an online program versus an on-campus program wasn't something that all 4 campuses had uniformly established. Each institution also had vastly different budgets and goals, and leaders from the 4 campuses perpetuated intense internal competition for resources.
I would think that. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say not probably again not a surprise to anyone watching this today.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was going to touch on is there is already a scarcity of resources pre-pandemic, even just this moment in higher education history, and so there's external competition for resources, and then there's that internal competition that's inherent because of that passion, and that people are so proud of, their program, and that they've either helped develop or they've helped innovate or whatever, that there's going to be those natural tensions that you to navigate along the way. And so I think one big thing there that you all had to do, probably still are doing, but that those listening are really be thinking about the inherent internal competition that's always going to come along the way, and how do you care for that tension, and how do you use that tension for good along the way.
Mhm.
Well, and I also think we hit the client lottery and or hit the jackpot in terms of we had such a strong partner, and that's our ideal partner is a really strong one that has equal intensity for the success of this. And so your institutional knowledge, Chris, your teams all had a lot of it, and varying campuses were coming together. So I want to just touch on a little bit about what were some of the institutional knowledge items your team brought to the table, so that when we were partnering, that this project was so successful.
So the largest campus, Mizzou, which is a D1 research intensive school, had been active in the online space since the 90s and had an established brand and accounted for a majority of the online student population. We'd been actively promoting their online portfolio with an ad campaign that gained brand equity for nearly a decade before Mizzou Online became the official name of our former office back in 2011. And then MU further raised their national profile when they joined the SEC. So no shift in brand direction could really harm that institution's trajectory. The University of Missouri St. Louis had strong brand recognition in their metro area and a healthy portfolio of undergrad offerings. And Missouri S&T was well established in the industry for its engineering offerings and had developed partnerships with employers like Boeing. And the University of Missouri Kansas City had focused their online portfolio on healthcare. The other campuses also had very well-known and well-ranked online programs, and in some cases had higher rankings and more program-specific notoriety than programs from the larger brand. So it was imperative that they not be made to feel like their presence was being absorbed or overshadowed. We also needed to ensure that no one on our Marcom team held on to any biases and always exhibited a tone of we're all working towards a fresh start together in all the conversations and presentations with representatives from all of the different campuses during this whole endeavor. Internally, we had to assess our resources in supporting this. Our team consisted of 11 marketing and communication staff who had solely supported Mizzou and its online portfolio for many years. So it was clear, in order to meet the challenges ahead of us, we needed a partner familiar with online higher ed, branding, and achieving digital marketing results. Enter Carnegie.
Yeah. And I will just say again, there was a lot of baggage being checked at the door from that internal now system Marcom team, because they had some deep love and of course knowledge for supporting Mizzou Online. And then now bringing in other campuses, there was this really diligent effort to then try to be as much of an equal opportunity service provider that I think was also really, really key in this project.
So Mel, let's unpack the work a little bit. When Carnegie was presented with the challenge of uniting 4 distinct brands, what was the approach?
It's a good thing we're usually up for the challenge, and similar to how Christine mentioned, my whole archetyping and personality is driven by overcoming challenges. So this was a lot of fun. But with 4 distinct brands coming together, that equally brings 4 set of stakeholders that have so much pride, have so much passion for their institutional and brand identity. And of course that change or any even idea of change can create some fear and some idea of how's this gonna upset the work we've done and put into establishing the identity we have now. And we also knew we did not, with this endeavor, as was the systems plan, wasn't to upset the apple cart to just do so, and that if it wasn't strategic to do so, we needed to know that. So the start of the project was really to first understand and retain the pride that each of the internal stakeholders had in each of their institutions, as well as understand the external understanding, so familiarity as well as maybe trust in each of the brands, that was fostered and understood, so that each of the 4 universities had an outcome and a strategy that wasn't going to deter from any previous work, that it was really going to be meant to build upon. So we were told at the beginning of this, each of the universities of the system had very different feel and kind of vibe of their campuses, and that it was going to be a tall order for us to really find enough similarities so that we were going to be able to create this brand umbrella. And we knew we need to dig into that and understand more what was the depth of the distinctions and the nuances of each of the campuses, of each of those brands, as well as how the e-learning brands fit into that and the similarities and differences between those. So our first question, even almost to back up, was, and from the very beginning, whether or not we needed to preserve each established university brand for online education, kind of almost leave it as is and just let the operational side of things run its course, or if there was enough commonality that we could create a unified brand. Of course, we were hoping for the unified brand, but we, as mentioned at the beginning, were very data-driven and strategic, that was known by both parties, that if the data and the strategy didn't lead us to creating that unified brand, we weren't going to go there. So what we needed to do is we went to each of the campuses, both because it was pre-pandemic. Actually, I think it was even February of 2020, January maybe, went to each of the campuses, did a roadshow across Missouri, and met with campus and e-learning stakeholders. We conducted workshops to then help understand the different personalities and the archetyping of each of the campuses. Didn't do, as I mentioned at the beginning, just small focus groups about feelings or really open-ended questions. We were there to put frameworks together to understand more about each of those institutions.
So how did you find commonality across the 4 institutions to inspire the brand that came together?
Well, we were, our hope was what ended up being true. So there was really strong similarities around among each of the institutions. Again, when we put the parameters of personality, of like what drives each of these institutions, is what we were looking to understand. So thankfully, because of that, and because of the external research that we have done, we knew we were going to be able to recommend that the brand strategy was to adopt one singular voice for both visual and verbal communications and all of that comes along with it, to span all of those e-learning brands under one brand strategy. So what we did is we had 2 main archetypes that were found among all of the brands within the system, and we're able to use that as then the positioning strategy for Missouri Online. This then allowed us to be able to position Missouri Online to have each of the university's brand equity for the greater good of all e-learning offerings, and providing opportunities to further differentiate from competitors in that virtual learning space. That was key. There weren't a lot of institutions coming together to create almost one powerhouse of e-learning, of established brick and mortar campuses, and how that all came to light.
Yeah, we definitely knew buy-in was going to be important to the success of this project. So when and what groups were brought in for buy-in?
Again, in this strong partnership, both the Missouri team and our team knew that we were going to have to keep stakeholders really informed and up to date, because creating this strategy and this framework in a vacuum wasn't going to do anyone good, us as well as the stakeholders included. We needed people to feel really good and part of the process so that when we were ready to launch, everyone was already on board. So throughout the life of the project, we ensured that those key stakeholders, think people like the oversight committee, president's cabinet, were included in our initial findings, and of course brought in those folks around very key and pivotal moments throughout the project, where maybe a decision needed to be made about a name or something like that. And that there was also campus leadership from each of the entities that they were involved and saw the actual research and saw why we were making those decisions, rather than just telling folks we were making the decisions and live with it. Thanks, good luck. And that, I think, was the key in creating that buy-in and as well as building that trust.
So what was Carnegie's approach to build and implement this properly?
Really, we let data lead the way, but our strategy is what helped us make those decisions. So we didn't just go on one certain data point or one person's point of view. We needed to make sure that everything was coming together so that we're making strategic decisions and those were sound, and that we were setting up everyone for success. So in turn, that diligence of the work and the data created that foundational positioning strategy that was then leveraged as basically a sounding board or like a guiding light or sometimes a true north for the rest of the process, that we could always come back to. Well, we are letting our brand foundation, through the data that we've collected, and we've all agreed this is our positioning, we let then that be how we came back to things like our naming, our logos, the campaign concepts, and how on campus or even just multimedia was then produced. And because everyone was bought into the strategy, and that strategy was informing those part of the execution, that was I think really helped us in that approach, and making sure it was built properly.
And after that foundation was set, we had a lot of work ahead of us. What were the key decisions to be made to get this newly formed brand into market?
Right. That's when the real work begins, right? There's times where you think all of the strategy is the work, and the strategy is the foundation, as you said, but then the visible work really begins after you have that strategy. And so the first and probably most important step was a name. We had 4 institutions coming together, and now I have a feeling any of you on here are saying, wait, you went with Missouri Online? That doesn't sound like a groundbreaking name to anyone, but we had to make sure we were putting due diligence in place to make sure that this important naming endeavor was informed by strategy. So we know that names help foster really like widespread recognition of organizations. What do they provide? It helps open a door to tell a compelling, authentic story that helps move people to act. We also know successful names don't follow a singular formula. We know things that are very functional, like Missouri Online or State Farm Insurance, Bank of America, or there are names that are wholly unique, meaning Google, Yahoo. Those things didn't mean anything to anyone until that brand established that as their name, but then had to put in the work to make that be known through a lot of work, what those things meant. So we conducted both quantitative studies as well as measuring public responses to those names to understand both, having this singular brand identity and how we thought about how users were actually searching for online education what were we able to do in order to go very functional, or were we able to kind of stretch our legs and get more into that unique or creative name? So we explored both ends of that spectrum, but because ultimately there was enough research to support that the naming in a functional way was the most important in this instance, that's where Missouri Online came to play. But we also knew we had the data to back us up, rather than, so when someone came and said, well, why didn't we think of something fun and creative? We had absolutely, ways in which we could go back to that and not just say, well, we just thought that was better. So with that brand strategy in place, that's where the expression began. So things like how that strategy was built upon in campaigns and channels. How do we think about our audience? We now understood who we were. We needed to understand our audience a bit more too. Creative campaigns, of course, photo, video, a website that was how to speak to our audiences. We did work in the psychographic side of understanding students that had already been attracted to the different institutions for online education. And how did we marry that with who Missouri Online is in their personality, who the students were, and again, connecting those dots. So it was I'd say the execution entailed very detailed, very strategic online advertising campaigns, because we needed to now introduce a brand. We had to then raise the profile, all while also making sure inquiries were coming in, application volume, specific programs were being tended to, and didn't lose any ground from where we were, but also introducing a new brand and how then to move that forward and create awareness of that as quickly as possible. We also needed to think about, logo development. We have a name, we have some ideas around brand strategy, but how does that inform what a logo looks like? So logo iterations were plentiful. We had a lot of key decision makers that were inclusive of key constituents of each of the institutions, as well as thinking about the external market and how we went into that market and understood quantitatively how well different logos were performing. So this is what you see the final outcome was of that Missouri Online logo.
So I see you have some variations of the logo identity on screen. Mel, can you share a little bit more about the logos in regards to the 4 campuses?
Yeah, I think there's a really important caveat to mention here, in that this newly formed brand, this umbrella brand, was now not a degree. It wasn't a 5th entity. This wasn't a 5th campus of the University of Missouri system. This was never going to, you're never going to graduate from Missouri Online. So there needed to be both what I'd mentioned earlier, the building upon the already well-known campuses of the system. So we were able to create lockups with each of the university logos with that new Missouri Online logo to basically signify to audiences that they were going to be graduating from one of these institutions, that these institutions now were part of basically this front door of online programming, and then that operational side and other things that came along with it. And so making sure that that was a measured approach, and a lot of time and strategy went into ensuring there wasn't going to be confusion, both externally or even internally, that this was now a new educational offering. It was a brand that folks were able to now understand that it was the power of 4 of these institutions coming together. And I think one of the most significant ways that, of course, an online e-learning platform has to tell its story is websites. And I know that that was a very large endeavor of your team, Chris. So I'd love for you to tell us just a little bit more about the website endeavor and how that came out to be.
So when our team learned in 2019 that we'd be part of a new entity that supported all 4 institutions, the website was the first thing that we tackled. Everything we did moving forward was going to drive to this destination, so it was a high priority for our team. One of the early challenges was redesigning a website that promoted a single campus to one that represented all 4. And the brand had yet to be established. So we were past the web development stage, roughly at the midpoint of the redesign project, when the Missouri Online brand was determined. We had 2 outstanding items to address. We had a new logo, yay, and we had Mizzou's signature gold throughout the site. But by utilizing the new brand palette and using color signaling for campus-specific information, we were able to visually bring the site into alignment. And then adding online program information from all 4 campuses was a huge lift by 2 members of our team. So out of necessity and to meet the deadline given by leadership to have this site live, we repurposed content from the other institutions. With Carnegie's help, since that time, we've methodically focused on optimizing those program pages to improve our search rankings, and that is working.
Yeah, I love that. So that's working. Let's actually dig into that in terms of the results. What have been the fruits of all of that labor that, of course, Chris and I are talking about, but as she mentioned, so many people and different teams have gone into making this project such a success. And so we were really pleased that after that first full academic year, after we launched the new brand, that this redesigned and repurposed website that had a show-stopping 880,000 new website visitors. That was a product now of 4 websites funneling to one place, so one front door of online offerings at the University of Missouri system. There was a massive digital marketing campaign, this one-stop shop mindset that operationally was going into place in terms of serving the audience's main needs. Rather than each institution just showing their programs, we were now able to really tell the story of all of the Missouri Online brands in one area. There was also such an impressive increase in overall enrollment and headcount gains in that first year. And again, that was born from that foundational brand strategy, those operational efforts of that newly, aligned Missouri Online staff and, faculty, and of course, just the diligent effort to have that brand strategy drive everything else that they were doing. So, of 22% of that, the course enrollment increase and that 16% overall headcount I guess I would say we were delighted and thrilled to see that within that first full year. We also, through that digital campaign that I mentioned, were able to attribute 6,000 new inquiries into the Missouri Online funnel, and 4,000 of those submitted applications because of those digital campaigns driving to that new website and having, again, a very cohesive and consistent message out into the market. So with all that great success, Chris, that's not the end. That were some of the first beginning steps. What are some of your next steps you're anticipating in terms of furthering the Missouri Online brand?
Yeah, we have a lot more work ahead, considering the brand has only been in market, like you mentioned, for 2 years. So we need to continue to build that brand awareness and increase those online enrollments. We've learned a lot from the initial advertising flights and continue to optimize our digital campaigns and utilize new ad types. And we continue to look for other market opportunities to explore in the future. Among some campus schools and colleges, there remains a reluctance to embrace the Missouri Online brand, even though the value of the lift across the entire portfolio is evident in the data. So our work is ongoing to obtain buy-in and adherence to the brand with our academic partners and others. We do have a strong relationship with campus Marcom teams. So their support and understanding of branding and digital marketing is very valuable to our success in further establishing the brand with our internal audience. So plenty to do.
All right, so I think I probably showed my hand there because the questions came onto the screen, but it is time for the question and answer section of this webinar. Chris and Mel, thanks so much for sharing that story with us and all your insight and what it took to get this great brand launched. By the way, Chris, congrats on the success. It's really impressive.
Well,
So,
I can't take all of that, but
well, you can share it.
I will take it on behalf of the group.
Pass my congrats on to all your teammates and all the stakeholders involved in that work. All right, so we do have some questions, and let me tee these up here for you guys. So first, we have a question from Bob. Did the budget model that Missouri uses also provide a barrier to the collaboration among campuses? Does Missouri use an RCM budget model? Do either one of you? Okay, thanks, Chris.
So the budget models vary. And so that was a big part of those higher level discussions that were occurring. And actually that model is being reassessed now. So it's, we've not fully landed on something yet, but it's a work in progress is what I will say.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Sure.
All right, next question from Ken. Did the 3 campuses ever feel like they were being asked to submit to a larger brand that left them undistinguished and effectively satellites of the larger school?
Yeah, we anticipated that. We anticipated that the other campuses would feel like they were being forced along the way. It's, when they were so accustomed to doing things on their own, knowing that they would be working alongside an institution that had a higher profile in general, just because of the investment that they'd made over the years, and the size of their portfolio. I think it was daunting and a cause for concern, which is why, we would continue to meet with the campuses and, make sure that everyone was involved. We had stakeholders involved throughout the entire process to try and help give an understanding that this was an endeavor with the goal of increasing enrollments for all 4 institutions.
And I think too, I had previously worked on, at the University of Minnesota system and was on a campus of the University of Minnesota. And so knew the feeling of like, oh no, what's coming at us? How are we going to have to now assimilate into something that isn't us or isn't going to showcase us? And that was why making sure we knew very plainly how there was similarity so that we weren't forcing an issue. And as Chris mentioned, making sure we were doing as much as we could to create trust in the process, to see that they were being asked along the way. I would probably venture to say we didn't ever do things perfectly. Every single person on every campus today could tell you it was the best. They have all their distinctions still, and it's not being gobbled up by any means, but there's still a lot of diligence and a lot of effort put into ensuring that's not the feeling and isn't the actual outcome either.
Great, thank you both. Our next question comes from Rod, and first, Rod would like to thank you for sharing today. And then he asks, I'm curious about how you differentiated at the national level, and he provides a little bit of additional context here, or follow up to his first question. Was the primary focus on offering distinctive academic programs not available elsewhere, in parentheses, it says blue ocean strategy, end parentheses, or more of trying to capture larger market share in a very highly competitive space? And he says, in parentheses, red ocean strategy.
Well, Rod, I have Blue Ocean Strategy, just here actually sitting next to me. So she'll know the ideas. And from the brand side of things, you know, we weren't tasked with the overall program development. You know, that's of course still led by faculty and campus leadership. And there has been, I know, you know, Chris could talk about it more than I could, but ideas around partnerships and where there were very similar programs. How did they either come together? How did you create further distinction? Like this program had this specialty versus that program had that specialty if they were very similar already. So nationally, it was less about the distinctive academic programs and much more about the distinction of the power of bringing those four together, and how then that experience and having such vast opportunities at this very well-known, very well-established e-learning endeavor was going to get folks ahead. I will say too, our first and foremost market, I think, has and will continue to be, you know, serving the constituents of Missouri, while also ensuring that those that need, you know, of course, online education in any state or any part of the world really can come and know that they're going to get a solid foundation. I know Chris also mentioned, you know, key markets have been cultivated and worked on that were already markets of all of those campuses, and then doing diligence in which markets to further expand into in the future. Christine, Chris, would you add anything else to that?
Yeah, I would agree. I think there are some programs in particular that already have appeal in different markets, and some of the other advertising that we're doing as part of the brand to promote individual programs or groups of programs focus a little bit more on specific DMAs. So it's definitely out there everywhere, but we're focusing, as Mel said, within this primary region on our first few years.
This next question is actually kind of along those lines. It's about your digital campaign strategy from Dominique. They ask, when it comes to Google search campaign strategy, does Missouri Online focus more on brand keywords or more higher intent keywords? So is it more of a brand awareness play with your strategy, or are you going for sort of further down the funnel keyword strategy?
Yeah. Right. Yes is the answer, right, Chris?
Yes.
Okay. Both then.
Yeah.
Awesome.
There's been a lot of diligence put towards building brand awareness, especially with a brand new name, a brand new entity, and of course, then I'd say most also has been keyword has been done on the program side too. So search behaviors and matching with programs of the like.
Yeah. And I guess to do justice to this question, there was an emphasis on more. So in answer to that, would you say that it is fairly balanced? There's not one that you're focused on more than the other. It's really the pairing of the two strategies, sort of top and bottom, that is how your work is executed. Chris, yes?
Yes, I would say it's a pairing of both.
Great. Thank you. All right, next question from Logan, and also a thank you from Logan. Question for Chris. Similar situation with some amount of rivalry and suspicion from main residential campus towards our online campus. A lot of our faculty and staff, however, are alumni from residential campus. Any tips for effectively utilizing existing alumni loyalty towards the residential branding and using it for the online brand? Even using residential alumni as staff/support? That's a good dynamics question.
That is a good dynamics question. It's not something that we've had to wade the waters through, fortunately, because we've had well, primarily because we've had an institution that's been so vested in online for such a long time. I will say that as part of our leadership with Missouri Online, we do have did have two individuals who were faculty from two of the other campuses that were partially working with Missouri Online. So all along the way. And they were certainly wonderful ambassadors for not only online learning, but also for Missouri Online. And I think that if you can capture individuals who are your champions, that would be your inroad for working with the other faculty who are more adverse to the modality.
And I'd say too, it's almost as similar to me, Logan, is how you're thinking about, you know, how does the residential campus experience, where are the commonalities of then that online experience, and how can you talk about the alumni network or the the things that you can create pride in, that both entities would feel that like, oh yes, that is similar. I do see why, that would be so great online. I know that there are a lot of campuses that are continuing to wrestle with, well, we're a residential institution, we don't need to play in that online space. But I bet that you could find, just as we did among 4 different institutions, there's some commonalities, and how do you use that commonality to bridge that gap?
Great, thank you. So last question here, which I think is well-timed. Oh, just kidding. We have one more, and so I think we have enough time to get to both of them. So this is coming from Ryan. Bob, we have more coming in. We'll try to get to all of the questions that are coming through. We still have time. I think
we'll add them later.
Wonderful. So this is coming from Ryan. Do you have any examples of the quantitative or qualitative research that Missouri conducted to establish the marketing campaigns or website design?
Sure, I can touch on that in general. Obviously, we don't have anything prepared here, but quantitative, a study in the external market. So understanding the familiarity and the reputation of each 4 of the institutions, and then how could we retain that while bringing those together and bridging those together. So we needed a benchmark. We needed to understand each of those, the campus's familiarity and reputation, as well as the viewpoint of the external market, those not affiliated with them, how then we used that data to align brand strategy. We also did, and the more of, I'd say, the qualitative side is the competitive analysis. So making sure that we understood what key competitors were doing in the marketplace in terms of their brand positioning, tone, style, personality, to inform the campaign and website design, and really the entire process. And really Carnegie's philosophy is all about differentiation and distinction. And so what are people doing? Is there anything that's being owned, and how do we do so differently? How do we make sure that our audiences are very clear on who we are, and we know who our audiences are?
Great, thanks, Mel. And I think we could probably connect with Ryan and get him some anonymized examples as well afterwards, or further the conversation too, right? Ryan, we'll share our contact information in the chat at the end of this, and if you'd like to have some additional conversation or examples, we can provide that for sure. So next question coming from Bob. With the unified marketing approach and its new promise to the prospective student, what efforts have been undertaken to fulfill this through the coordination, centralization of other key online program infrastructure, such as enrollment management and recruitment, academic alignment, for example, online modality definitions, tech, for example, CRM, etc. Sounds like Rob is doing this or has done it before. These are good examples. Instructional design / development, quality assurance, etc. across the 4 campus partners. So alignment question.
Right. So part of our merge in 2019 involved teams from other campuses. So they came under our umbrella as well. So instructional designers, academic technology, our program coordinators who work closely with faculty in online program development, our research team, our student support services group, who are on the front lines answering those prospective student calls and emails. So that centralization was all a part of our early merge. And so that has allowed us to be, a large entity serving all 4 campuses with the same voice, with the same intention, with the same goals in mind. And so that has been a 2-year endeavor now. We're in year 3. So that has come along very well. We slowly absorbed different groups as different campuses came on board. The last institution came on board. When I say on board, I mean, that's when everything was tied up in a bow as far as having programs listed on our site and staff redistributed last fall. And I missed what the other half of the question was, if I can answer that. Sorry.
It was, I think you're doing a great job answering the question.
Okay. Did I miss anything?
I think you got it for the most part. The question was about alignment of systems. Like, have you done any technical alignment with CRMs?
Right.
Have you done instructional development alignment, that kind of thing?
Yeah, CRM is fun, right? So each institution had their own Slate instance, and one of the institutions actually had 2 Slate instances. So we're working with 5 different Slate instances. That one of the next projects is to funnel that into our own instance so that we can better manage and better report on everything. So that is an ongoing endeavor, but luckily everyone was using the same type of CRM.
At least the same CRM, not the same instance, but at least it was
not the same instance, but the same CRM.
At least not 6 CRM. So
that is lucky.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we have one last question here from Kendra, and the question is, do all 4 entities engage collectively to market digitally, or are there separate budgets and plans for the institutions?
So for the Missouri Online brand and its year-long campaign, that comes out of a single budget. But each institution is in partnership with us to promote their own offerings. So for example, one of our institutions promotes its full brand as far as its full portfolio, and then some select what we're calling advertising investment priority programs. And so those campaigns would very strongly have their campus lockup, and the brand would have the primary brand logo.
Okay.
There are a lot of campaigns in market right now.
All right, great. So that is the end of our question and answer session. Thank you all so much for some really thoughtful and great questions. That always helps, I think, this discussion. So thank you for your participation, and Chris and Mel, thank you for your answers, and again, for sharing the story. So we just want to do a quick summary of takeaways of the learnings that we promised. I probably won't do Mel and Chris justice here as I try to summarize what we heard today. But our first area that we wanted to learn about was building consensus and brand strategy. So what we heard from the 2 of you today is, first and foremost, to ask the hard questions. In this case, is this possible? And ask those questions at the start, and then go to campus, of course, if you're able to, and include all of your stakeholders, faculty, students, employees. Do the research, internal as well as external, and find that commonality through a relied upon framework. The example that we provided today, of course, is Carnegie's personality archetype. And then to include your stakeholders again, all along the way, actually, sharing the research, standing up oversight committees, and having the right people in the room when the decisions need to be made. The next takeaway and learning opportunity that we talked about delivering on today was how brand strategy facilitates awareness and enrollment growth, which was a part of this Missouri Online story. We know that brand strategy establishes who you are and who your students or your audience is, And it creates the foundation on which you will connect with them and establish a relationship. We know that authenticity attracts, and that the right students for your institution will be attracted to an authentic brand that you're able to express. And of course, we do want to elevate our brand to their awareness with a marketing plan, which then sets us on that course towards growth. And that really leads us to the last takeaway, which is how do we integrate a brand and marketing strategy? We know that the brand strategy will tell us how to communicate to our audiences, and the marketing strategy is really going to deliver that information on where and when with frequency. And I think what came away from the story today is that the key elements of this particular part of the work is the collaboration with your colleagues, the coordination across teams, and in this case, campuses, and consistency as you apply your brand standards, ensuring that your brand is consistently expressed across all of your channels. So that's a quick summary of what I heard today. That's really it for us today. I have a couple of resources that we like to share that relate to the content that you heard about today. So we'll actually make these available for you in the chat right now. The first is you can dive a little bit deeper into the Missouri Online case study. The second piece is a quick download for a guide to digital branding. And then, of course, if you're looking to partner for brand strategy, marketing strategy, creative, reach out. We'd love to hear from you, talk through your ideas, share some of our own. We will share in the chat here a link that gives you some options for getting in touch with our team. You can also just simply email me to start a conversation, or Ryan to get additional resources for your question about external and I think it was external and internal research examples. And then just a last ask to please take our survey. It really does help us develop content, improve our delivery. It only takes 3 minutes. We will also drop that link in the chat, which I think is happening now. But I will also email you, or actually you'll receive an automatic email with that survey after this webinar concludes. So last but not least, thank you all for coming today. Chris, Mel, thank you so much for being our subject matter experts today on online brand strategy. And thank you to our participants for being here with us today and asking such great questions. So thanks very much. And we hope to connect with you all again soon.